All right, Math 1 students, we have 1.4 solving absolute value equations. The essential question is, how can you solve an absolute value equation? The first thing we need to know is, what does absolute value mean? When we take the absolute value of a number, it's between that number, the distance between that number and 0. And you have to remember, absolute value is the absolute value of a number is always going to be positive no matter what. Think of, distance. When I was younger, I ran track and cross country. In college, I ran track and cross country, and we would go on long runs, and you would never hear me say I ran -10 miles. Okay, so absolute value is always going to be positive. Taking the absolute value of a number, we use brackets, which are these brackets here. And once you take the absolute value of that number, the brackets fall off. Okay, so that's something to remember. Pause this video, go ahead and write out the outline, and we can go ahead and get started. Remember, you must have a title and your name in pen on your notes, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Example 1 is going to ask you to simplify. So remember, no matter what, if it's positive or negative on the inside of the absolute value signs, when it comes out, it's always going to be positive. So the absolute value of 3 is 3. Let's take a look at B. We want to take the absolute value of a -2, which is +2. The brackets fall off. There's a plus sign, so we're going to bring that out. And the absolute value of 5 is +5. So your final answer is 7. Again, students, I am showing my work, even if it's that simple, okay? What I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring down this negative. Notice how it's on the outside of the absolute value brackets. The absolute value of a -5 is a +5, but because there's a negative already out here, that's why it's at -5. Bring down this negative, and the absolute value 4 is +4. So now if you take a look, you can say we're adding two negative numbers. -5 minus 4, that gives you -9. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the next one. We are actually going to solve. So before we simplify, I'm just getting used to, there was no equation, no variable, no expression. Solving, we're actually solving for some answers. And again, if you think of a number line, students, in both directions, a negative direction and positive direction, you can say the absolute value of 3 is +3, but you can have a 3 in going to the left on the number line, 3 units to the left or 3 units to the right. And again, we're counting from 0. Okay, so when we have an equation and we're solving for a variable, we're actually going to have two answers, and I'm going to show you how to set it up. But before we set anything up, there's a couple of things that you have to first look at. The first thing that you want to look at is if you have numbers on the outside of the bracket, either to the left of the brackets or to the right of the bracket, right here. If it's empty and there are no numbers, then we can set our equation, then we can create our two equations, okay? Another thing that you want to look at is if there's no number here and there's no number here, and maybe there are, and you simplified, if this equals a negative number after you got rid of this number and this number, okay, if this equals a negative number, remember when we take the absolute value of a number, it can never equal a negative number. So this number has to be positive after you have gotten rid of any numbers here and here, okay? So we know it's a positive number. There are no numbers here or here. So we're good. We can set up our equation, and this is what it's going to look like. We're going to have two equations. One's going to equal a +11, and the other one's going to equal a -11. So x plus 6 is equal to +11, and then we have x plus 6 is equal to -11. Okay. All right, so we're basically going to solve both equations. These are one-step equations. Subtract 6 and x equals 5. Subtract 6, you're adding two negative numbers, x equals negative 17. If you are not confident or comfortable, students, you can take these numbers, you can plug them in for the value of x, and guess what? You'll get a positive 11 when it comes out of the absolute value sign. Okay, and that's what we're going to be doing. Let's take a look at B. This time B actually has numbers. There's no number here, but there is a number here on the outside of the bracket. So we have to get rid of this before we create our two equations. Okay. Yes, I know this is equaling a negative 3. Okay, but after you get rid of this, if it still equals a negative number, then we have something called no solution. But watch what happens when we get rid of that negative 9. We have to add 9. We end up with absolute value of 3x plus 6 is equal to positive 6. Okay, so now I'm looking at this expression, and guess what? It equals a positive number. I can continue and create my two equations. I'm going to have one equation is 3x plus 6 is equal to positive 6. The other equation is going to be 3x plus 6 is equal to negative 6. Whoops. All right, let's go ahead and solve. Subtract 6, subtract 6. Oh, it's kind of tight right here. We end up with 3x is equal to 0, which means x is going to equal 0. Okay, I'm actually going to bring this one up here. Let's subtract 6 and watch what happens. 3x is equal to negative 12. Divide by 3. X equals negative 4. Okay, so we have a negative 4 and we have a 0. Very nice. Again, if you want to check your answers, you can plug them back in and they should equal that. Okay, let's keep going. C. Again, let's get rid of anything that's on the outside. We actually have two numbers that are on the outside of the brackets. First thing you want to do is get rid of this negative 3. Again, I understand that it equals a negative 11, but we have to get rid of what is on the outside of the brackets before we can make any assumptions, okay? So a negative 11 plus 3, that gives you negative 8. Again, we have to get rid of, think of these as parentheses for now, so we have to get rid of this negative 2 by dividing each side by negative 2. And you end up with the absolute value of 5x minus 1 is equal to positive 4. Okay, so this brings us back to what we started with in example 2a. We don't have anything on the outside of the brackets. It's set equal to a positive number, so we're ready to continue and create our two equations. 5x minus 1 is equal to positive 4, and 5x minus 1 is equal to negative 4. Let's go ahead and solve, students. Add 1 to both sides. We end up with 5x is equal to 5. That means x is equal to 1. All right, let's go ahead and do this equation. Positive 1. We're going to end, looks like we're going to end up with a fraction. And that's fine. 5x is equal to a negative 3. Divide by 5. Divide by 5. X is equal to negative 3/5. Okay? All right, fantastic. Let's do one more, students. One more, and we're going to call it a day. Okay, so remember, if there's nothing here on this side, on the left-hand side of the brackets, we're good. Nothing on the right-hand side of the brackets, perfect. Now, we got to make sure it's set equal to a positive number. It's not, okay? We don't have anything to divide out or add or subtract out. So students, remember, if it's set equal to a negative number, This is what we call no solution. So you have to be aware of problems like letter D. That's your answer.